Dan menyertai saya dalam perbincangan seterusnya adalah saudara Sundara Raj. Beliau adalah dari PwC Southeast Asia Consulting Services, dan juga bersama saya juga adalah saudara Zafri Yusof, Ketua Komunikasi dan Perhubungan Awam dari Google Malaysia, dan menyertai kami di talian adalah Cik Arina Syamsuddin, pengusaha kedai kasut distro. Saya nak bermula dengan saudara Sundara Raj. My first question is, based on the report that was unveiled about 2 days ago, it's basically on PwC report saying that most local firms are not social media savvy. Now, why is that when everyone around the world is basically engaging people on the internet, on the social media? Why are we not there yet, Mr. Sundaraj?
Thank you very much. And I think when you said 2 years ago, that makes a difference. If it was 2 years ago, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. What we have seen is that, you know, when we did our survey, and the reason we did this survey is because we felt that social media was actually what was shaping the new business environment. And that was a bit of a labor of love that we put together to actually find out what is really happening out there. Everyone's talking about social media, but actually are they getting the value out of it? So we found, as you had correctly pointed out, less than 60% of companies really know what they're getting out of social media. So 70% of our companies say they are on social media, but when we did the survey and said, do you know what you're getting out of it? Very few companies actually came back to us and said, yes, they do. Now, there are a few reasons to this. Yeah. Very few companies actually have a social media strategy. So when you ask companies, are you on social media? They say, yes, we are. When you ask them, why are you on social media? They say, because my neighbors are on it. So I think that causes a bit of problem because you are on a platform without knowing what you're going to get from it. Now, I think this is a very important fact that we have to consider when we look at new strategies. When we even asked in the survey, how many of you have a budget for social media? And less than 60% of the respondents actually said they had a budget. You will also find that social media seems to reside in parts of the organization which are traditionally in communications or public relations. Now, we asked this question.
Yeah, let me ask you this question. Sorry to cut you off, but who should lead this? Because, you know, in an organization, normally the younger ones would actually lead this, but if you have an older leader who is not converted yet, how do you make that change? Because, for example, in Astro Awani, we need the social media. For example, before I actually go on air on a daily basis, I will tweet, I will take selfies of myself on Instagram to make sure that people who ever follow me, please tune into the news so that I'll get high ratings. How do you convert other organizations to do the same?
Yes, and I think that's the whole problem. And when you have social media residing in corporate comms and public relations, what happens is you are listening. You're not turning that information to what we call insight. So how do you convert people into this? One is you need to show the value. People need to realize by being on social media, you actually get value out of it. And, you know, it's about seeing is believing.
Oh, yeah.
And when people just listen about it and hear about it, you have what we call lurkers. Now, there's a very important and interesting rule of thumb in online community. It's called the rule of 1%. What it says is that in any online community, you have 1% of the population that actually creates content. Then there's another 9% that actually interacts with the content. And the rest of them sit down and just absorb it. They're called lurkers.
Okay.
Right? So that's a big problem.
Okay, Zaf, maybe you can share with us some success stories, you know, how other people are doing it well in Malaysia so that others can actually follow and basically using social media to the max, and they can actually see immediate or fast gains, and that will actually be the buy-in for the rest to actually follow.
Yeah, I think, you know, you probably hit the nail on the head when you said that you know, you Instagram yourself, you take selfies, and you know, I am always impressed by how Astro Awani itself kind of adopts platforms like Google Hangouts and so on. But I guess the other thing that the research kind of reminded me of is just how little of our SMBs actually are in fact online. So that's kind of like the base level that you want to gauge, right? So according to SME Corp, and we've been using this number quite a lot, it's like 700,000 of the Malaysian SMBs, only about 15% are online, which is kind of a big discrepancy when you consider that 2/3 of the Malaysian population are actually online. So that's what it means is that Malaysian consumers who are online are not discovering these businesses, much less interacting with them on the social media space.
Yes, I have one more question. Based on the survey by PwC, there's one aspect which I find really, really interesting. 84% agree that social media at the workplace drives innovation. Why don't you want to, convert? Zaf, to start, and then followed by Sundar.
Well, I mean, I think most of it has to do with results, right? If you find that social media interaction actually gives you valuable business feedback, then you're going to bound to be using it more and more. And I think a lot of these companies probably just haven't taken that next step. And I think this research would probably be one of those things that you can cite to kind of move the decision makers to make those sorts of decisions. Okay. If I could just share one example of one of Google's partners, people like Malaysia Airlines, they've decided to kind of embrace Google Hangouts and do things that interact with their key stakeholders. They, for example, would support the launch of their ambassador, Yuna, who recently had an album launch, and she totally did that through a YouTube live stream where she got a lot of views through YouTube, and that was live views, and she also had valuable feedback, and Malaysia Airlines gained a lot of new kind of advocates during that time.
Yes, Sundara Raj, this 84% agree that social media at the workplace drives innovation. How do you further convince people to actually go big time?
So 84% say innovation is driven by social media. Why are we not getting everyone to have social media in the workplace? The answer is twofold. One is risk, second is fear. Many organizations fear something new. And social media is dangerous if it's not used well. If you have proper risk management policies, if you have proper embedded risk management culture, an organization will be able to handle the perils of social media very, very well. And one of our findings from the survey suggests that less than 46% of our companies actually have social media policies. So what does that mean? When CEOs look at social media and open it up to organizations, they get very worried that social media will run wild. Now, there are many instances, there are many stories where you see social media, just one simple tweet or one simple posting on Facebook could bring organizations down, could actually bring individuals down. So I think for us at PwC, what we are saying is this: put in place robust policies and risk management procedures and get that culture of understanding risk management of social media well, and you will be on the right trail to get innovation going using and leveraging of social media.
My last question to both you gentlemen. When will you see a big change based on what the survey has actually enlightened us? Do you see a big change next year or maybe 2 years from now? We'll start with Mr. Sundara Raj first.
So what we hope to do is to see a big change tomorrow.
Okay.
Not next year. And maybe just very quickly to add, what we want to see is a more engaged CEO also. And what we mean by that is the new CEO needs to be really accessible, he needs to be authentic, and he needs to be aware. And we hope that happens very, very soon after this report.
Okay, Zaf.
Well, I think for us, it's a case of the population itself being generally a very young population. And if you want to reach out to the majority of people with buying power and with decision-making power, you're going to have to go mobile and you're going to have to go social media eventually. So that's sort of inevitable when you think about it.
Baik, terima kasih saudara Zaf Yusof dari Google Malaysia. Terima kasih saudara Sundara Raj dari PwC Southeast Asia Consulting Services, dan juga terima kasih kepada saudari Arina Syamsuddin, pengusaha kedai kasut di